facts and stuff, with such precision, then can I actually model the retweet dynamic I observe? That is, can I make a model that matches what I see in my data? So that's one question. Can you model the retweets? So I want to go a bit further than that. So I don't want to just model the retweets. I want to ask the question, does your model tell you something non-trivial about the data that you didn't know before? Does your model predict something you couldn't measure beforehand? It's just some kind of operational value you get from the model beyond its fitting data. And we'll see in the talk today this is indeed possible for retweets. Okay. So now it's a quick talk overview. So we'll begin by just looking at Twitter data and doing some kind of simple analysis of it. Then we're going to use that data to actually develop a model that tries to fit the retweets we see in Twitter. So we'll try to model what we observe. And finally, at the end, we're going to actually use these models to give some non-trivial insights about Twitter. In particular, we're going to get insights about the visibility of a tweet and about the time it takes for people to react to tweets. Right? This will be non-trivial insights we're going to derive from this model that fits our data. Okay. So first, some basic terminology. So we're going to assume a tweet occurs at a time t0. So that's the moment Ellen kind of took that picture and then clicked the tweet button on her phone, right? That's t0. Now, after that, 3.3 million people retweeted it. So to retweet, they saw the tweet on their phone or their little machine, and they clicked retweet. So the time of that retweet, we're going to call that t1. Okay, that's the moment someone clicks on that tweet. And now the difference of t0 and t1, we're going to call that time r, and that's the time to react to a tweet. Okay, so that's how we're defining R here. It's the reaction time. Now, before I've actually studied these reaction times in Twitter in a small data set, and we found that you can actually model these times with something called a log normal distribution, which I'll talk about in a second. Okay? And that initial work kind of says, okay, things are log normal, so people follow some model. And so we actually use that model to actually predict retweets in Twitter. I won't be talking about that here today in this talk, but just to kind of show you the picture, we built this thing called Twysics. It's like Twitter plus a Ouija board, and it's like a website, Twysics.com. We have tweets there. You can basically click on the tweets, retweet time series, this blue curve, and the red bar jumps the word thinks is going to be the final retweet count. So already, with a simple log normal model, we can actually predict with reasonable accuracy how many retweets a tweet gets. Okay, but that isn't the focus in this talk. This talk, I want to go deeper, beyond just that prediction. Okay. So to get deeper, I needed more data. That initial study was with like a couple thousand retweets, but now I need more data. So I started crawling in Twitter API, and I got 2.4 million retweets. Okay, so 2.4 million T0s and T1s from different tweets. Now these come from the Twitter API, streaming API. So they say it's about 1% of the entire fire hose, and they tell you it's sampled at random. How it's sampled, they don't tell us, but we're going to assume it's just uniformly random from the entire fire hose. Okay? So I have 2.4 million retweets, which means I have 2.4 million samples of these reaction times. And now I got to model these things and find what fits the data. So we'll start with a very simple assumption that all these times come from some like global distribution. Okay? There's some like global truth distribution that people draw their reaction times from. We're going to try different models for that and see which one fits best. Okay. So let's try three simple models. One's called the Pareto model. So this model has kind of a fat tail. If you heard of power laws, this has a power law decay. So this means that long retweet times are very common for Pareto. We'll try what's called a gamma distribution. This guy has a tail decays exponentially fast. What it means is that there's not many long retweet times. Things are kind of like short. And then let's try this log normal thing I talked about earlier. So a log normal means the logarithm of the time is a Gaussian random variable. Okay? And this is kind of in between Pareto and gamma in terms of like the tail decay. Okay? So if you think Goldilocks, too long, too short, and maybe just right. Okay? So we've already seen that in my previous analysis. This log normal is the best for fitting. But that was with a couple of thousand retweets. Now let's look at 2.4 million retweets. Let's see which one of these models wins. So I'm plotting here the model scores, two kinds of model fit scores. One's called the Akaike information criteria. This basically calculates your likelihood score minus the penalty for having more parameters to prevent overfitting. The other one's called your Kolmogorov-Smirnov statistic. So this measures the difference between the data's distribution and your model's distribution. Okay? And smaller is better for these scores. So for my three simple models, my winner is log normal. The pink bar here, it has the lowest score of all these guys. So log normal, even on this big data set, is still the winner in terms of model fit. Okay? So we could stop there, right? It's log normal, let's move on with our lives. Well, we can't stop there. There's more to the story. Because if you take this log normal guy, and we look at it more closely. So let's zoom in on the distribution of these guys at short time scales in the order of seconds, and long time scales on the order of days. So in the short time scale, so I'm plotting here is the fraction of times below this value. So for example, at 10 seconds here, the model says there should be about 5% of my data is less than 10 seconds. So of all my 2.4 million retweets, 5% of them should be less than 10 seconds. But in the actual data, there's like nothing below 10 seconds. There's very little data that's faster than that. So something's going on there that the model isn't capturing. Okay? Out here in the large, in order of days, the model says, look, at 10 days, if you have like 3% of your data beyond 10 days, but the actual data says, look, you have like 5% beyond 10 days. So there's like a mismatch here too. Okay? So log normal tells a lot of the story, it doesn't tell the whole story. So now what's going on here in this like quantum regime of fast times, and here in this kind of relativistic planetary scale of days regime. Okay? What's happening there? Well, first the slow time scale, right? This planetary kind of scale, on the order of days. So why are there so many retweets that are longer than log normal predicts? And my hypothesis is that these come from what I call non-conventional retweets. So the conventional way to retweet is you go on your phone and you look at the most recent tweets and you find something you like and you click it. Okay, that's conventional. Non-conventional is I search for something, like maybe Justin Bieber, and I find a tweet by him from like a month ago in his profile, and then I click it. So I'm actively searching out a tweet and finding it through that mechanism. Not through the natural interface of Twitter, but through like actively searching through Twitter. So those will give you longer retweet times. Okay. And to make things really precise, let's define what I call E to be the encounter time. So the encounter time is the time for you to actually, between when the tweet's posted, T0, and when you see the tweet. Not when you click retweet. That takes more time, but just you see it, okay? You encounter the tweet. So we're going to say the encounter time is going to be a mixture of two types. Some fast guys that do it conventionally, and then these slow guys that kind of do it the non-traditional way, okay? So that's going to cover the slow time scale. Now on the fast time scale, well, I said that I encounter a tweet, right, in time E, the encounter time. But then I got to do a couple of things. I got to read the tweet, hopefully. I decide in my head do I want to click it or not to retweet it. Then I actually pick my finger and I push down and I click retweet. So these three steps, I'm going to lump these into a thing called the processing time P. Okay? So my total time should be the encounter time plus my processing time. All right? That should be what this reaction time is end to end. All right? So let's fit them all this data and see what we get. So let's assume for the processing time, it's an exponential random variable with the average value tau p. Okay. For the encounter times, well, we saw log normal is kind of like fitting the data well. Let's just say this encounter time is also a log normal, but there's two kinds of log normals, a fast one and a slow one. Okay, with parameters mu fast, sigma fast, mu slow, sigma slow. And then pi is going to be the fraction of my fast retweets, the retweets that come from conventional retweeting. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parameters in this model. So we'll just fit it with maximal likelihood estimation and see which model fits best. So the model parameters when I fit it look like this, and they're kind of interesting. So the model fit says that the fast guys, their parameter from you is like 6, which means that the median time for these guys to retweet is like 6.7 minutes. Okay. The slow guys, their parameter is about 12, 11.77. So that means the median time to retweet for the slow guys is a day and a half, 36 hours. Okay. The tau p, the processing time, the model says that's 21 seconds. So the average time to actually look at a tweet, read it, decide, and click is 21 seconds, which is reasonable if you ever use Twitter. And finally, pi, the fraction of the fast retweet times, is 81%. Okay, so 81% of my retweets are these fast guys. So most of them are fast, not many of these non-conventional slow types. Okay, so that's the model fit. But does these extra parameters actually make my model fit better than the previous log normal model? Well, actually, it does here. So here's our log normal in pink. That's our best thing so far. First guy is log normal model 1. So model 1 is just fast and slow reaction times, or encounter times. Nothing about processing yet. Model 2 takes into account that processing time of a couple of seconds. And you see that model 2 actually fits better for both score metrics than the other models. And if you look here at the distribution curves, right, the red's the data, and the black one is model 2, and that black one is actually fitting the data much better than the pink curve does. Okay? So now we kind of see that these reaction times I saw before aren't just log normal, right? There's like more things going on there. There's this processing time, there are these fast and slow guys coming together, right? Okay, so we have encounter times are log normal, and they're these fast log normal guys. And that's the bulk of Twitter, from what we see in our data here. And the fast guys, they follow this log normal curve. That's what this analysis told us, okay? And now you kind of ask these like what I call Twitter physics or Twysics questions, which is, why is it log normal? Is there some reason that this thing pops up? Because I'm not the first person to see this. So other researchers looking at Twitter have seen that these reaction times look log normal, okay? And also people have studied email patterns. They've studied the time between when you send an email and get a reply, and those times also look log normal. Like, it keeps popping up again and again in these analyses of human reaction behavior. So why in Twitter are we seeing log normal things? And I'll try to propose one model that explains why this is log normal now, okay? So here's the model. So let's imagine someone visits Twitter at these times marked by the red arrows, okay? So this is the guy that's going to put up a tweet that's going to be retweeted. Think of this to be like Ellen. Okay, this is Ellen from the Oscars. And the first tweet here, that's the tweet of her and like all those celebrities that broke the record. Now here comes me, a random retweeter on Twitter. I also come on Twitter at random times, right? Now the tweet of Ellen happened here at the beginning, so that this gap between her tweet and when I check Twitter next, that's the encounter time. That's when I'm going to encounter this tweet for the first time. That's when I get the chance to actually retweet, okay? But I have to understand what E is. My model fitting says it's log normal, but can I generate that from this kind of model? Well, to do that, I got to understand, you know, the gap between these times. My inter-tweet time, how is that distributed? Okay. So we're going to model these processes as something called the renewal process. So it's a very simple process. So we say that the ith tweet happens at time ti. So I'm tweeting at these times. And I say it's a tweet time because I can measure that. What I really want to measure is like the time to actually check Twitter. But I can't check that. Twitter can check that, but I can't check that. But what I can check is when you tweet. So let's use that as a proxy for actually seeing, you know, being on Twitter. Now I'll say that the time between the tweets, the inter-tweet time, is something called x, a random variable. And in the renewal process, it's really simple. We say all the x's come from some distribution f, and then f is the same for every x. Okay, so every person in Twitter has some f that's associated with them that dictates the time between their tweets. Okay, so let's just fit models to these inter-tweet times and see which one's the winner. And we'll try really simple ones here: Pareto, gamma, log normal, right? Like long time, short times, and in between. And the way we'll do the fitting is we'll take every user, we'll fit these three models, see which model wins in the different score metrics, so then like count how many users are the winners for each model. So we need some users first. So where do I get the users from? Well, again, it's a Twitter API to the rescue. So I collected 2.4 million retweets. Okay, so it's like millions of actually unique retweeters in that data set. From that 2.4 million retweets, I picked 5,000 users. Okay, why 5,000? Why not 2.4 million? Well, the issue is rate limiting. So Twitter's API limits me to how many people's profiles I can pull. Right? So this took a couple of days to get these tweets, but we have it for 5,000 users, and it's about 1,000 tweets per user. Right? So this is your entire Twitter history. Every tweet you've ever posted on Twitter, I collect that. So I know everything about you. Right? It's very easy to get that data. Okay? So 5,000 people, we'll fit the three models, we'll compare our two scores, the AIC and the KS, and just see who's the winner. Okay? So here's the results. So I'm plotting here is the number of users that won for each model. The blue is Pareto, green is gamma, the red is log normal. You see that log normal actually fits the most. The most users are fit best by a log normal distribution, much more than gamma and Pareto. Okay? So it looks like things seem log normal for users, at least a big chunk of them. This shows the distribution of the user's inter-tweet times in the red, and then 3 different models in the different colors here. And the black guy is log normal, and log normal matches the red data curve better than the other models here. So this is like 3 of the better fitting users in the data set, but overall, like most of the users look like this. So log normal actually fits this behavior well. Okay. Now every user is fit individually, right? There's a different parameter for every user. So maybe you're wondering, are people really, really different and heterogeneous, or is there kind of commonalities in how we behave? So what I'm plotting here is the parameters mu and sigma for the log normals for all those 5,000 users. Okay? So like for the mu here, the average value is 6.6, standard deviation is 1.6. So it doesn't deviate too much around the 6.6 number. For the other parameter sigma, average value 2.3, standard deviation is 0.5. So it kind of suggests that people are different, but we're not that different. Like our dynamics in Twitter are relatively a little bit heterogeneity, but not too much. Okay, so that's kind of nice, right? People are following this kind of log normal model with very similar parameters. Okay, but now back to this model, right? All right, so now I kind of looked at this inter-tweet times, and I found that a log normal fits them best. Okay. So I don't want the inter-tweet time distribution. I want E's distribution. How do I get this guy's distribution? Okay. And this is where like the mathematicians and the probability theorists come to the rescue. So we can do it using something called the residual time. So let's say Ellen DeGeneres tweets at that time t. It's a random time as far as I'm concerned, right? So then when she tweets that, my next visit to Twitter is at ti, and y is going to be this time minus the tweet time. Okay, that's what we're calling the encounter time, and this has a very specific name in renewal theory. So it's called the residual time. It's the time until the next arrival when you pick it at random. And the nice thing is that with renewal theory, we know the distribution of that residual time exactly. So if I know what x's distribution is, the inter-tweet times, we said it's log normal, then I get for free this guy's time. Okay? And this is our encounter time, and so we're done. Right? That's it. That's the equation for the distribution, and that should be log normal. Well, actually it isn't the whole story. There's one more thing you have to take into account. So E was the encounter time, which means I encounter the tweet. Which means I go on the Twitter at that time, TI, and I actually see the tweet in my phone. Okay? So I have to see the tweet. It has to be visible to me. And that actually adds one more wrinkle to the model. And I call it the visibility correction. Okay? So here's an example of my Twitter timeline. So I come at that time, start looking at these tweets, and the way I use Twitter, and the way most people use Twitter, is that I check, maybe C tweets. So I go down my list, maybe 30, 40, whatever tweets. I look what's in that window, I click, I reply, I do whatever, and then I go back, I put my phone away, and I go back to my meeting, or my webinar or something. So beyond that cutoff C, I'm not going to see your tweet. And the problem is I'm following other people on Twitter, my Twitter friends, and they're also tweeting. So once you tweet something, Ellen, right, it's being pushed down my timeline, right? And I got to basically catch it before it falls out of this window. If I catch it, I encounter it. If I don't catch it, it's gone. And lambda is different for every user, right? Everybody's timeline fills up at a different rate, and roughly it depends upon how many people you follow, okay? So I got to take into account the visibility correction. But how do I take it into account into my modeling framework? Well, let's think about the probability of retweeting. So it means I visit at the time t, right? So I come at the time t after the tweet's posted, and then I have to also see it. So two things got to happen. I got to get there at that time, and I got to see it at that time. So getting there at the time is our residual time. That's that y thing we talked about. But this probability we got to figure out now. So I'm going to call that v. V for like visibility correction. So this is the probability the tweet seen by you is visible to you at time t. Okay? So the encounter time density should be the probability of encountering, of being on Twitter at that time. That's this residual time y. And this visibility term v, right? We know this term. We got that from renewal theory. We just got to figure out what the v is. Right? So what is v? There's a very simple kind of argument to give you what v is. Okay. So if the tweet's in the cutoff window C, then I see it. Otherwise, it isn't there. So the probability I see the tweet is the probability of lambda times t. So t is how long a tweet's been alive. Okay. Lambda t is like how many tweets have been kind of created in my timeline in that time period. As long as that's less than c, the cutoff, I'll see it. Okay. And lambda is random from person to person, so this is a probability. Okay. So the probability of lambda is less than c over t. And the lambda is a random thinker. So I can write that as a distribution of this lambda random variable evaluated at this coefficient c over t, where t is the time. Okay? And now if t is really, really big, then c over t is really, really small. I can do a simple like Taylor approximation. And it says that the visibility term should scale for large times like 1 over t. Okay? So that's what this kind of simple heuristic argument tells us. It should be 1 over t. So now let's see if this guy, plus the renewal theory, gives us what we see in our data. Okay. So let's look at the asymptotic residual time. Let's make the time really long and see how this thing behaves in the long regime. And I pick long t because when you're messing with log normal stuff, the equations are really, really messy unless your t is very big. So very big, I can give you like an equation. For small t's, I can't give you any kind of clean insights like that. So for large t, what happens? Well, for large t, your residual time density is going to be given by this equation here. So it's e to the minus log t squared minus a log t to the exponent. So something like that. Okay, that's what that residual theory analysis gives me. Now let's chuck in that visibility correction, right? So 1 over t for large t. We're going to get that log t squared, the exponent, this extra log term, and then t in the denominator. Okay, that's what it should be. Now, I said that encounter time was fit well by a log normal distribution. What does a log normal density look like? It looks like this. You've got a log t squared, the exponent, and a t in the denominator, right? So if I neglect the visibility correction, I don't get this extra t, and I actually have a fatter tail. So if you do the analysis without visibility correction, you're going to think there's going to be long reaction times, that people can retweet, hours and hours afterwards with high probability. When in reality, they don't. They don't because they don't see it. And this visibility correction compensates for that. It gives you the model. Okay? So asymptotically, we kind of see that the reason it's log normal is because people are arriving at Twitter log normally, plus the fact of the visibility correction. Okay? So in one sense, I've kind of answered the mystery of log normality. It comes from our arrival process. In another way, I just kicked the mystery upstairs one level in the hierarchy of questions of humanity. So I'll leave it at that. I haven't figured out yet why we arrive log normally. That's a more fundamental thing, but at least now we know that in Twitter, retweets are log normal because of how we arrive at Twitter. Plus the fact of Twitter's interface design. Alright. So now let's take a visibility correction. We say it's 1 over t for large t. Let's kind of look at it in more detail to get a bit more understanding of it. So we said that the timeline rate depends on how many people you follow, how many friends you have in Twitter. Okay? So if I follow these people, they're my friends, they're all going to give me tweets, they're going to fill up my timeline. So let's put F into our model for lambda, timeline rates. And this is a very simple thing. Okay? So we're going to say the timeline rate is the number of friends you have times the rate at which they tweet. The rate at which they tweet. Tweets per hour or something, right? So what should this rate be? Well, we know the inter-arrival times are x. Then like 1 over x is the average kind of rate. So instead of using average, let's use the median. So the number of friends you have divided by your median inter-tweet time, is random, right, is going to be your rate. And because these x's are log normal in our model, the median is very clean. It's just e to the minus mu, or use your model parameter. So I pick a median because it makes the analysis simpler. Okay? Again, it's a heuristic, but the important point is that this lambda is now random, but this mu is a random thing. Okay? I can measure a particular person, I can measure your f, but the mu might be different. So we're going to make that be the random guy, if we know f. If we don't know f, we can model as a random too, and the whole thing is random. Okay? But now we can have a model for lambdas with parameters. And now we can do some fitting and see what these parameters should be. But one more issue mathematically that's important about this model, before we start fitting model parameters. And that is that the way I have it now, the density of these encounter times isn't properly normalized. Okay? So for example, if I integrate the density of the encounter times, it's integral of like the residual time density times this visibility correction, right? Which is going to be derived as the expected value of this random y of this quantity c over y. Okay? Let's call that thing P seen. The important thing is that a density should be normalized to 1. This normalizes something that's guaranteed to be less than 1. Now you're saying, oh, who cares, right? That's just a normalization constant. It's not important. It's just scaling factor, right? Why do you care about that constant? Well, you care because this is actually tells you something non-trivial about Twitter. Okay, this is one of our first insights about Twitter. What P seen is, it's the probability you see the tweet in any finite time, which means the probability you see the tweet, which is why I called it P seen, right? The probability the tweet was seen. Okay, we get that for free from our model. Once we fit the parameters, this pops out as like an extra benefit we get, which is not something we designed the model to predict in the first place, but it tells it to us for free. And it gives us some insight. It tells you, when you put a tweet up, how many people are going to see it, right? What fraction of your follower base actually see it. But we'll get to this in a bit, of what this is, but first we got to fit the model to figure out what this is. So to fit the model, we did a very simple thing. So we said, okay, encounter times are log normal. We know their parameter values, which is mu fast, sigma fast. This complicated renewal theory model with visibility corrections and residual times, that's got a couple of parameters in it. Let's fit those parameters to match the log normal of the encounter times with mu fast and sigma fast. Let's minimize the k-statistic between distributions to make them fit best. So this is the one way to kind of fit the model to the data. Now if you do that, one interesting thing is the cutoff parameter you get from the fitting it, because this is a model parameter, is 21 tweets. So according to this analysis, people chuck an average 21 tweets, and then they go back to their lives. Again, it's different from person to person. It's just like fitting everyone together as if it's one global thing. The model fit looks like this. So the black one is the log normal encounter time curve we had before. The red guy is modeled with residual times and visibility corrections. And you see they kind of fall on top of each other, similar distributions. Okay? So this model actually fits the data pretty well. And we have model parameter values now. But now we can start asking some non-trivial questions, right? First thing was P seen. What is the probability that you see my tweet? Okay. So let's look at P seen as a function of the friend count. Okay. So quick question. How do you think P seen behaves if I have more and more friends? Who's got a guess?
Goes down.
It should go down, right? That's what our intuition tells us. What does the model tell us? Model says, yeah, that's what happens. That it starts up for like 100 friends, it's like 0.025, so like 2.5%. Get to 1,000 followers, you're at like 0.005%. So the typical viewing probability from this curve is like a percent. Like a percent of your people will actually see your tweet. Does that number make sense? Does that match what we see in Twitter empirically? Well, we can't measure the chance people see your tweet, unfortunately. But it can measure when they see your tweet and they click on it. So what it can measure is the average retweet count of a user divided by the number of followers, which is the potential audience for the tweet. Now if you do that for 5,000 users, you get that that ratio is 0.002. Okay, so a typical user has like 1 or 2%, and 0.2% actually click on it. So this number is less than that number, which is good. It should be less than that number. And if you trust that number, this means that like 1 in 10 people, when they see your tweet, actually bother to click on it. Okay, so does that make sense? Well, I can't offer much data for that question, right? I can't say how many people see a tweet actually retweet it. But I can say for Ellen's tweet from the Oscars, right? That tweet basically had total visibility. Like people are watching, millions of people are watching the Oscars. She tells them all in the TV medium, go or retweet this. They don't check Twitter then, right? So visibility was probably pretty high for that tweet. Probably in the order of like, 90, 100%, right? Because you're watching the Oscars, she's telling them, tweeting now, go do it. She got like 2 million retweets within a day. Her follower base is 20 million. So with that kind of like blanket coverage and broadcast medium of television, she still got 10% of her followers to actually click on the tweet. So 1 in 10 actually clicking when they see it agrees with this analysis that 0.2% actually retweet and maybe 2% see it. All right. But the important point is now we can calculate the chance someone sees your tweet, and we get that for free from our model. So that's our first non-trivial insight. All right. Let's try another one. So reaction time versus friends count. So what do you think? If I have more and more friends, will my reaction time be faster or slower? A lot of friends, should go faster, right? Or slower? Slower. So you think I have more friends, it's going to be slower. Okay? Anybody want to counter that? All right. So let's see what the data and the model say. So the data here is in the red. So this is, I took all my 2.4 million retweets. I binned them by the number of friends they have, the person retweeting, and I look at the median time in each bin. So the black curve is a prediction of our model. I can make f like a parameter you can tweak. You see that the more friends you have, actually the faster you retweet. The drops. Okay. Now why does it drop? Well, it drops because if you have a lot of friends, you can't even see a tweet that's old. It's out of your window, so you don't see it. So when you do retweet something, it had to have been a fast retweet because you caught it before it was pushed out. Yeah. So that's why that intuition matches. And you can see the model in the curve, it's off by a factor of 2. So my model predicts faster median time than I see in the data, but only by a factor of 2. So that isn't so bad for a very, very simple model I proposed, right? That is actually fitting in the right order of magnitude, in fact by a factor of 2. And again, I've made very little assumptions about what's happening in the data. So that's our second non-trivial prediction. The more friends you have, the faster you're going to retweet, if you do retweet. The final implication is kind of important for Twitter's revenue mechanism. And it's about promoted tweets. So right now, the way Twitter makes its money is you basically write a tweet, and then you tell Twitter, I want these kind of people to see my tweet, this demographic or these particular followers. I'll pay this much if they click on it, and this is my budget, this is my time window, maybe 1 or 2 weeks. And then you post that ad campaign. Then they figure out internally how to show your tweet to the people to get the clicks, but at the same time not to ruin people's user experience. So then people will get flooded with promoted tweets. Okay, so that's how they make money. So what happens is if you're targeted for promotion, the tweet's going to sit on top of your timeline. It's going to be held there until for the duration of the campaign until you check in. Check in Twitter, you see the tweet first, then it starts going down. Okay. Now this holding time, well, actually in our model we can figure out what is the visibility probability as a function of the holding time. Okay. In particular, our visibility correction, just make that 1 while you're holding a tweet, and then let it drop down normally, like we did before. Okay? So we can actually tweak that parameter in our model as like an engineering tool, engineering lever you pull to adjust the visibility of a tweet. And if you plot that, it looks like this. So this is the visibility probability, PC, as a function of the holding time. So if you hold it you don't hold it at all, to 10 minutes, you go from, for a person with 200 friends, 2% visibility to about 5% visibility. So 10 minutes of holding it almost doubles the visibility probability. And this whole curve maps out, the visibility probability is a function of how much you hold it for. Okay. So why is this important for Twitter's operations? Well, it suggests that you can actually predict how much more visibility you get for a tweet the more you hold it. Okay? And visibility is the thing of value for a customer at Twitter. So this can be mapped to a price for holding it, right? So imagine a model where Twitter now has what I call power tweets, right? Just a tweet that's blasted on a lot of people, but only for a few minutes. And then it goes away, like random junk, right? But it isn't held for select people for a long time like it is now. It's just blasted, and then it goes away. This tells you how to actually price how long you hold it for, right? And if you're doing competitive bidding on these things, this kind of curve lets bidders kind of strategize, how should I bid in this product? The important thing is I basically turn holding time into an operational lever you can play with now on Twitter with this model. And again, this is not the thing I wanted to model initially. That was not the goal of this modeling. I was just trying to explain retweets. But from that, I got this thing also for free. So another non-trivial insight about Twitter. Okay. Okay, so that brings me to the end of my talk. So, just to wrap up. So you've seen here that with all this data from Twitter, we can actually build some pretty cool models to explain what we see in the data, these reaction times and retweets. And our model for these things incorporates 2 things. Human behavior, how you arrive at Twitter, and Twitter's interface design, right? How you actually encounter tweets and engage with tweets through their platform. And finally, this model, while designed just to match, the reaction times of Twitter, gave us some non-trivial predictions. It tells us the probability of a tweet being seen. which is pretty interesting. It tells you, how does the number of friends you have impact how fast you can retweet things. And finally, it proposes that, if you hold a tweet, how much do you increase its visibility as a function of how long you hold it for. So again, 3 non-trivial insights we get from our model. So we're not just modeling data here, we're trying to actually engineer things in Twitter, right? The first step in physics was to build models of electrons. Next step was build computers for those models. I think I view Twitter the exact same way. It's first we get the models for how people actually interact, the basic Twysics of the world. And from that, you figure out what you want to optimize revenue-wise. You can use these models as engineering tools to actually optimize revenues. Okay? And that's all I got. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Tauhid. Why don't we start with questions from anyone in the room?
Yeah, sure.
So I imagine the time of day has a pretty big impact on the behavior of the tweets. How do you model that, and can you use this type of model to basically tell a company or somebody here's the exact kind of time period where you should tweet in order to get the natural following?
So in this model you saw, there was no notion of time and day in my analysis. It's very kind of large scale, lumping together. So actually I realized that at the end of this. So I actually began a new project I call Tweet Time. And Tweet Time takes into account time and day effects. The question asked is, what time of day should you tweet to maximize visibility? And there it kind of incorporates these 2 factors. The fact that your followers are on Twitter at different times. You can measure that. And their timelines have different rates at different times a day. You can also measure that. So take those 2 things, being on Twitter and the kind of competition from other tweets, and tell me the optimal time to tweet. We've actually found that our model for that problem actually works kind of well. I've actually submitted a paper on that to an operations conference that's going to be taking place in June. And just for kind of give you a teaser, our first results for Barack Obama. So Barack Obama, our model predicted that, if he tweets at 8 o'clock versus 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he'll get a lift of 20% in his visibility. If you look at his retweet counts in those different times a day, the retweet count difference is different by a factor of 100%. So our model is under-predicting there. But again, it's a small amount of data. It's the first step. But that's indicate you can actually calculate what time should you tweet. What is your tweet time? So that's in progress now. Yeah, great question. Yeah.
Twitter make money on views, impressions, or does it make money on an ad being retweeted? And what do you think the differences are?
If I'm an advertiser in Twitter, for paying Twitter money, I pay them when they get a click. So they're making revenue if somebody actually clicks the tweet.
And by that you mean drill through to a link that the advertiser is
just click
embedding?
Your favorite.
Oh, just retweet your
favorite. Engage with the content in some manner. Got it. But they can measure the impressions. They can measure when someone sees it. But they don't pay for that. But they use that for doing TV ratings. So for example, this company Bluefin, maybe you heard of, they use Twitter to actually measure TV ratings. And they can measure impressions to do that. So for TV ratings, they use impressions, but for revenue, it's actually engaging with the content.
Does your model account for the different ways that people view Twitter? For example, if I look at it on Hootsuite as opposed to the native Twitter feed on my computer, or as opposed to my phone, is there any way to account for that?
Right now, we saw that with its visibility correction term, right? And that basically assumes you're viewing it on some similar platform for everyone that just is chronological tweets. Now, if you use a different platform, what you would do is you'd figure out what fraction of your user base uses that platform, which you can measure, and you would change the visibility term accordingly, right? But I think it'd be very similar. It's just chronologically ordered tweets, right? The difference might be the cutoff window size, but again, that's a parameter in the model you can fix. So the model is flexible enough to get more detailed with things. Right? This is a very simple model. It's kind of the first proposed model of this. But even with that simple kind of thing, you get some cool predictions.
Do you think that this is a valid framework for other social media platforms?
Great question.
Log normal behavior?
So I get this question from my colleagues. They're like, why do you study Twitter? It's not fundamental. But I tell them, actually, it is fundamental. Because any social media you've ever engaged with, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they're all the same, right? It's there's a bunch of people I follow, I get content from, and it's displayed to me in some chronological order. Now, Facebook actually does something different. They kind of prioritize some things, but it's still chronological, right? So the framework here is small, it's very general. And this log normal thing of how people arrive at Twitter, I mean, they're using their phones and they're checking Twitter. So I think that arrival pattern is going to hold for whatever the next Twitter is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. So So I think this is like a fundamental model of how to actually model engagement with social content. And this is the way everything works. It's just people, you follow people, and they fill up your timeline, reaching stuff, and then you click on stuff you can see.
So they're, so if somebody retweets it, that means they are kind of sending it out to all their followers, right? But then there's like a multiplier effect, right? Because people can retweet.
The retweet multiplier effect. So I've actually studied this in detail. So I looked at like a bunch of tweets and their retweet kind of graph structure, so how far it went. For 99% of those guys, it was just like one hop. Like Ellen tweets, and then he gets retweets, and it stops. Once in a while, like you get like a boost, but it's a very small fraction of the retweet. Unless this is when it wouldn't happen. If a Justin Bieber fan tweets something, and Justin Bieber retweets it, it basically is a little blip for the first time, like 3 or 4 retweets from the fan. Bieber retweets it, you get like another thing. But the way I view it is like when Bieber retweets it, he's almost like creating a new tweet, right? And then the dynamics evolve the same way. It's still log normal for him. So it's like log normals on top of each other.
Is your ultimate goal to exploit all of this to get a lot of Twitter followers? And
I think the tweet time question is for me to exploit. Like once I figure that out, I'm going to use it for myself, what time I should tweet. That's for me personally. Also for me, it's a curiosity scientifically. Like, can you actually model these things? And are people really that similar that these simple equations explain things? And it's cool that they do actually. We aren't that different.
So would this be a tool that an advertiser would use, or would this be a tool that Twitter would use, or some combination of the two?
This tool, right? I think if you're an advertiser, right, and you understand the kind of lift you get in your visibility versus holding time, if Twitter were to implement this kind of advertising, they haven't done it yet, but they haven't done it because they haven't thought about like this kind of phenomenon yet. Then it's for advertisers, but also it's for Twitter because they can like set base prices for different kind of holding times. Like they can adjust the auction structure. So this is like a tool that's going to be incorporated in both sides, advertisers and market makers.
Have you looked into any kind of like user segmentation at all? I know like I think some of what I saw there could have been explained by the fact that people with 1,000 Twitter friends are addicts to some extent. So yeah, they see things faster because they're hopping on Twitter all the time. Whereas like I have a Twitter account because I had to sign up for one for a class one time, and I check it maybe once a month. Have you broken up your analysis?
So this analysis assumes nothing about the content of the retweet, the person doing the retweeting. Everything here was just like a number, right? Okay. But you can imagine if you know that like for certain class, if you know your followers and they're of this type, they have this kind of arrival pattern, then actually our tweet type model, the new thing we're working on now, does incorporate that directly. It just says give me your followers, when they're on Twitter, how they retweet, how they get received tweets, and then optimize my time with that data. So our new model actually, it's beyond segmentation. It's like every individual follower, figure out your like properties, and then optimize over that, right? So it's optimized over all my followers individually. When should I tweet to get most of them?
Besides the advertisers and Twitter itself, can you think of any other implications for, I don't know, corporate users?
The easiest one is like this, so not this particular project, this is for like advertising and promoting tweets, but if you just want to optimize your visibility of your content, right, and you're like some celebrity or some corporation or some brand, then you construct a tweet, then you have a choice when to put it up. You'll put it up at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. So our new model, which I didn't talk about today, but I'm very excited about, is going to be exactly that. It's going to tell you, listen, you should tweet at 4 o'clock, because that's when your followers are on, and, you know, that's when you should tweet. Or if you want to hit the West Coast market, we'll do the tweet time on that market only. Those followers get a new time and tweet at this time to hit that market. So that model is totally customizable. Okay. This model is more like advertising and understanding like the fundamental physics of Twitter.
There's like research that shows that companies, when they do downward earning revisions, they always do Friday afternoon because it's the least visible.
So
that's the best time to release bad info.
It's called a news dump, right?
Yeah.
We've known this intuitively in humanity for many, many years, right? Any kind of bad news, you dump it on a Friday because the media is like checked out. There's no one's on, no one's on in the weekends. Yeah. This is like taking that to a very kind of fine, analytic, precise level, that intuition we had. And that's why Twitter is cool. It takes these kind of human things we knew intuitively, like any kind of PR consultant knows these things, and just make it an operational thing. Yeah, that's the intuition. This is the quantitative model based upon the intuition. And this is the solution. Tweet at 4 o'clock on a Friday, and no one's going to see it. Or tweet on Tuesday at 3 p.m., and everybody's going to see it.
So we were talking about data miner and CNN earlier. I mean, do you think they're using algorithms similar to this to basically say, we know that this tweet should follow this pattern, and if it is above that, then maybe it's, you know, an anomaly, and so maybe it's more breaking news, or maybe it's more important than kind of the standard tweet would suggest?
I don't know what they're doing precisely. My gut tells me that they're trying to tell CNN, look, we're going to find the breaking story before it breaks. So to do that is actually a different problem. They're actually going to look at the text of the tweet and just a kind of natural language processing to figure out, is this content relevant? Is it a newsworthy thing? That's a much more complex problem. I'm not doing that, and I think these dynamics aren't really useful for them, because dynamics kick in when people are engaged. When there's a crowd, then they do those things. But if there's a crowd, the data miners already kind of lost value, right? Like, they missed the boat in that case. They're trying to get it before the crowd's even there. And if there's no crowd there, there's no timing data there. The only thing there is the text. So it's very different than this problem. But also it's a very important problem.
Do you know what would constitute, like, could you design an optimal tweet for retweeting? You would say, like, it tends to be this many characters, it has one link, it has 4 proper nouns.
There's already been some studies on, I think, empirically that looked at what gets you clicks. And things that get you clicks are like pictures get you clicks.
Yeah.
And there's some other kind of features you put in a tweet that make it clicks. But they're very like kind of high-level anecdotal things, right? This isn't talking about that. This says forget those things. Just take one dimension. There's like the timing, for instance, right? Like just that thing. How much work do you get from tweaking that parameter? There's other parameters in a tweet that'll impact its clicks, which I didn't study here. But yeah, for you to know, put a picture in the tweet, you get more clicks. Put a picture with your mom, you get a lot of clicks. You notice that too. Something shiny. No, like your mom gets clicks. Like it's aw, you get those kind of things. Some Twitter truth for you guys.
And so when you send out a tweet, it's on all your followers' timelines, plus the people that you reference in the tweet, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you're Katy Perry, you tweet anything, 40 million people are going to be available to see it, potentially.
Okay.
Any more questions?
I think that might be it. So thanks again, Tauhid. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks a lot.